This is Vanessa Gorman. Today we're looking at the paradigms of the article and the first and second declension nouns in ancient Greek. If you're going to memorize something, you should memorize the things that occur most often so as to save yourself the most time and effort. And far and away, the most important thing to memorize in Greek is the definite article, because the definite article will give you some of the noun endings, but it will also help you interpret nouns when you're not sure about the endings. The definite article only has 24 forms, and it is clear and easy to interpret. So please, please, please memorize the forms of the definite article. Now remember, it acts as a type of adjective. It can be translated as a or an rather than the, and sometimes it's not translated at all. It can be used to mark a certain kind of modifier. Something that modifies is something that describes. So it modifies a noun itself with the word the, just like the word red or the word big, and it matches the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. Gender meaning masculine, feminine, or neuter. Number meaning singular or plural, because we're skipping dual for the time being. And by case, I mean nominative, genitive, dative, or accusative. And that's the order that paradigms are given. The four most common cases in Greek: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. So the article in ancient Greek looks like this. Most paradigms will be presented to you in this order: singular before plural. The case order looks like this. And typically, if it has three genders, it will give you masculine, then feminine, then neuter. But let's notice a few things about this paradigm. First, you'll notice they're all short, and that all but the nominative of the masculine and feminine start with tau. The tau is the root, and the rest of it is the ending that we're going to be using on nouns, so pay attention to that. Notice that those first four forms are rough breathings. So the ones that begin with a vowel are all rough breathings, so they're pronounced with an H sound on them. And they're also proclitics. They lean forward, so they normally have no accent. So, ho, tu, to, ton. Hoi, ton, tois, tus. You'll also notice in the dative there is a little mark under the omicron, which is called a iota subscript. There is originally a iota in that word, but it is so weakened over time that it isn't even pronounced, and it's just left as a remnant in a little bit of what's called the iota subscript. If you look at the feminine, he, tes, te, tain, hai, ton, tais, tas. Very similar pattern. In the neuter, to, tu, to, ta, ton, tois, ta. If you'll notice, neuters look exactly like masculines in the genitive and dative. They differ only in the nominative and accusative. And if you'll also notice, neuters look alike in the nominative and accusative. So if you see to, you don't know if it's a nominative or an accusative. If you see ta, you don't know if it's a nominative or accusative. You have to sort it out by context. So essentially, you're learning two sets of articles, the masculine and the feminine, because the neuter is so easy to add in. You just have to know to and ta. These are the forms you need to be able to recite like crazy, because these are the forms that you will see all the time. Now, the feminine article is always the same for all feminine nouns, no matter what declension the noun is. That there are three patterns of noun declensions, as they're called. Likewise, the masculine, if it's a masculine, it has a masculine article no matter what declension the masculine noun is. But let's look at this example of a feminine. A typical feminine first declension noun is arche, which means rule or beginning. We get the word monarchy from this, and the archon, the official at Athens. This is a typical first declension noun, as we call it, and you'll see that it looks just like the article in its ending, and in fact, it declines looking just like the article endings. However, some first declension feminines end with an alpha instead of with an eta, but it still has an eta in the article because the article never changes. Likewise, if we get very few feminines in the second declension, it's going to have completely different endings, but you still use the same article. So, hey, hodos, it means road, and the same goes for the third declension. Hey, polis is a city-state, even though the endings don't match. So don't expect the endings always to match. The article also can be used without a noun to stand in for the third personal pronoun. So he, she, it, they. Sometimes they just get lazy and throw in the article. So if it does that, then it's replacing some word that has an antecedent. That is, it has a specific noun somewhere in the context that it replaces. It's acting like a pronoun. So pronouns replace nouns. This man, that guy. The article can function as a pronoun, in other words. If it's functioning as a pronoun, when we get to the tree, we'll label it the way the noun would have been labeled. What does that mean? Well, we'll see when we get to the trees. I'll give you examples. But for example, hi ephugon. You know ephugon means they fled. By putting hi there, we know that the they has to be feminine because it's a feminine article. So we know it from the context. Somewhere earlier on, we have hi stratii or we have hi fruroi. Stratii meaning armies, fruroi meaning guards, guard units. And it can also, sometimes it can mean just some, especially if there's a conjunction. Hi did this and hi did that means some people did this and some people did that. Again, we'll see examples as we go along. Likewise, we can have just the masculine article, ho ethuon, he was sacrificing. Because we have the ho somewhere else in the sentence, we know it refers back to a polites, who is a citizen, or a stratiotes, which is a soldier. Also, the article often occurs with names, and obviously you don't translate them with names as a rule, although we do say the Piraeus for the place name, just like we say the Hague. But the article commonly occurs with names. Now, what about the nouns? The nouns have a stem that is derived from the genitive singular form, not the masculine or not the nominative singular form, because in the third declension, it's a different stem often. So there are 3 declensions. The first one is almost all feminine, and it has this alpha or eta stem. Like agora, in the genitive, it's agoras. The second one is an omicron stem, and it is mostly masculine and neuter, with a very few feminines like hodos. So we have demos, demu, people, or horion, horiu. And notice that in the dictionary entry, you'll see the article next to it, or they'll give you some indication of the gender. Horion meaning the region or area. We get chorus is related to this. The third declension varies a lot, and that's why you need to have the genitive form to figure out what's going on, because nux becomes nuktos in the genitive, and that tells us the stem is actually got a kappa tau in it. It's contracted in the nominative because the nominative got a sigma, and kappa tau sigma contracted into a xi. Mes, menos, you lost the nu in the stem, in the nominative, so we have to know the nu is there. Strateuma, strateumatos, you have to know that the stem has that mat in it. So this is why the genitive is important, particularly for the third declension, which we're not going to get to for a few chapters now. We're going to do the first two declensions, which are simplest. They look pretty much like the article. So once you have the article, you really have the first two declensions. In the first declension, most are feminines, and the plurals always have the same alphas as the endings of the article. Hi, hemerai, the word hemera, to a day, if some, tone, hemeron, and notice the genitive plural is the same on all the genders, and it's always long. Tais, hemerais, and tas, hemeras. But the singular has alphas instead of etas. The singulars have alphas only when the stem ends with epsilon, iota, or rho. Otherwise, the singular has etas just like the article. So you can see the difference between hemera and mache. It's not very hard. A long alpha and an eta are not so different from each other in sound. And so it's not like it's going to be hard to notice. And also you've got the article there to be your friend to tell you what case something is. Sometimes it can get confusing. You notice tes hemeras and tas hemeras look the same. The form is the same in the genitive singular and the accusative plural when it's an alpha stem. However, the article will tell you which one it is. The context probably will too, but the article is the dead giveaway. Now, accents on nouns are persistent. That means they try to stay where they originated. So the accent on thalata is going to try to stay on the alpha, but if any of the later vowels are long, it has to pull back one because you can't have an acute on the antepenult if there's a long vowel on either of the last two syllables. So because the eta is long, it has to pull back. Because the eta is long, it has to pull back. These alphas are both short, so it can go to the antepenultimate. Likewise here, the penultimate is long, and it always gets circumflexed because it's actually a contracted vowel. Nominative plural ending is short, even though it looks like it should be long, even though it looks like a diphthong, but it is treated as a short, so thalatai. The genitive plural always has a circumflex, we've already mentioned. Also, sometimes you're going to see words like this with double taus, and in the dictionary or lexicon, you'll see it with double sigmas. Don't worry about that. That's simply the Attic dialect that's used in Athens tends to replace double sigmas with double taus, and it's the same word otherwise. So that, in a nutshell, is the first declension noun. It's not hard to learn. There's 8 forms. Well, maybe a few more if you add in the alpha stem as opposed to the eta stem, but it's very, very simple. If you know the article, you know these endings. It's as simple as that. There are a few words in the first declension that are masculine, even though they have first declension endings for the most part. Because they are masculine, they are modified by masculine articles. The thing that gives it away as a masculine is the genitive singular has an oo in it, and also the nominative singular tends to add a sigma. Otherwise, the endings are the same first declension endings we normally use for feminines, right? So ho polites is a citizen, to politu, to polite. Notice we have the masculine articles, so we know that these are masculines. And there's only a handful of these, and they're mostly occupations. So harmostes is a kind of provincial governor, a harmost. It's often translated just as it looks. Likewise, hoplite is a soldier, a heavy armored soldier. Peltast is someone who shoots slings, is a slinger. Polites is a citizen, and stratiotes is a soldier. And these are the only common masculine first declension nouns. And I'm going to give you the first declension nouns that occur most often. So on a separate handout, I've given you 26 nouns in the first declension. The ones in red are masculine, the others are all feminine. And you can see on the right how often they occur in Xenophon's Hellenica. And all of these occur more than 20 times in Xenophon's Hellenica, and these are the only first declension nouns that occur more than 20 times in Xenophon's Hellenica. So again, if you're going to memorize the most common words. So for example, hemera, day, shows up 108 times. That's worth learning. Gay, land or earth, shows up 75 times. That's worth learning. Kore, land or territory, 102 times. That's worth learning. So use the frequency lists to learn vocabulary. Each chapter, I'm going to give you some vocabulary, some sentences that have only the vocabulary on the frequency list, and then you're going to have a section of sentences that introduce some new vocabulary that you will look up the meanings. But if you memorize the ones I give you, you will save yourself time. Now, that's the first declension. What about the second declension? Second declension nouns are pretty much all masculines and neuters. A very, very few feminines, mostly he, hodos. In fact, that's the only one you're going to see a whole lot of. As we've already said, neuters have the same form in the nominative and accusative case always. They also match the masculines in all the other cases. Here's a peculiarity. Neuter plural subjects always take singular verbs. Neuter plural subjects always take singular verbs. Just get used to it. Endings otherwise match the article in the second declension, so it's pretty simple to go forward. So, ho theos, the god, to theou, to theo, ton theon, hoi theoi, ton theon, tois theois, tous theus. If you know the article, you know the endings. Likewise, in the neuters in the nominative singular end with on, and in the nominative and accusative plural end with a. So, to chorion, tu choriu, to chorio, to chorion. Ta choria, ton chorion, tois choriois, and ta choria. So if you know the article, you know these endings. Just know to add a new to the neuter singulars. That's all it takes. And again, I'm giving you a handout with the most common second declension nouns. There's more of them this time. I'm giving you a total of 34. Again, these are all the nouns that occur more than 20 times in the entirety of Xenophon's Hellenica. And you can see by the count which ones occur the most often. Hodos, road, is the only feminine on this list. The neuters I've put into red, so you can just notice. Ergon, a work or deed, we get ergonomics from that. Hoplon, armor, right? We get the word hoplites from that. On the next page, we also have pedion, a field or a plain. Stratopedon. Strategos is a general. Stratopedon is an army encampment. Sometimes it's just the army. Tropion becomes the word trophy, and chorion is land or territory. Now you'll notice a lot of these are fighting words, quite literally. Infantry, polemarch. Infantry is actually pedzos, meaning foot, right? Cetos, grain. Strategos, general. Stadion is a unit of length, about 2 meters long. We get the word stadium from it. Philos is a friend. Fruros is a guard. Again, these are all very easy to deal with. These are all pretty straightforward words. A polemarch is a general, another word for general. Polemios means someone who is an enemy. Polemos is war. So with this common vocabulary, if you learn these nouns and the article forms, you're going to be good to go for much of the text of Xenophon's Hellenica.